All right, everyone. Buckle up because we are going over all of the books I read in the month of August. And apparently that number was 8. I did not think that I read that much. However, apparently I did. Yeah, I didn't think that I read this much in the month of August. Considering this month, so far, I'm recording this on the 17th, I have not completed one single book. So that's great. I guess that's kind of a lie. I'm currently reading Demon Slayer, and I read 5 of those this month, but I don't, those are not on my list. Demon Slayer is really good. If you haven't seen it or read it, highly recommend. All right, so we're just going to get right into it. The first book I read in August is called The Twisted Ones by T. Kingfisher. By the way, all of the synopses that I'm reading out are from Goodreads, so. When a young woman clears out her deceased grandmother's home in rural North Carolina, she finds long-hidden secrets about a strange colony of beings in the woods. When Mouse's dad asks her to clean out her dead grandmother's house, she says yes. After all, how bad could it be? Answer, pretty bad. Grandma was a hoarder, and her house is stuffed with useless rubbish. That would be horrific enough, but there's more. Mouse stumbles across her step-grandfather's journal, which at first seems to be filled with nonsensical rants, until Mouse encounters some of the terrifying things he described for herself. Alone in the woods with her dog, Mouse finds herself face to face with a series of impossible terrors. Because sometimes the things that go bump in the night are real, and they're looking for you. And if she doesn't face them head on, she might not survive to tell the tale. So I went into this book with extremely high hopes because I've read The Hollow Places by the same author before, and it was absolutely incredible. If you like body horror and disturbing imagery, run, do not walk to your local bookstore or library. I'm a librarian, so I'm going to suggest library, and go get your hands on any of T. Kingfisher's books. T. Kingfisher is top tier body horror and atmosphere, for sure. That being said, I did like The Twisted Ones less than I liked The Hollow Places, but that doesn't mean that I didn't like it. I definitely still liked it a lot. Mouse, the main character, was super easy to like, and I adored all of the other characters. I don't want to spoil anything in these reviews, so I won't go into much more detail about the other characters, but even if you're just picking this up to learn more about the other characters, you're going to have a good time. So this one is definitely one I need to reread because there are tons of hints throughout the book as to what is going on, but none of it makes sense at all until the very end. A reread would be fascinating to see how much I missed the first time. The way that T. Kingfisher describes the most specific horrors are why I like their books so much. They're realistic, and they're not too over the top, which makes them even scarier, I think. Body horror really gets me, so if you like that type of spooky, atmospheric body horror situation, you should absolutely check this out. It's a little bit of a slow burn in the beginning, but when it ramps up, it really ramps up and hits hard. All right, the next 2 books I read, these aren't in any specific order, but I thought I would just group these 2 together since they're by the same author, are both by Grady Hendrix. And this first one is My Best Friend's Exorcism, which we actually read for Spooky Book Club. Abby and Gretchen have been best friends since 5th grade, when they bonded over a shared love of E.T., roller skating parties, and scratch and sniff stickers. But when they arrive at high school, things change. Gretchen begins to act different. And as strange coincidences and bizarre behaviors start to pile up, Abby realizes there's only one possible explanation. Gretchen, her favorite person in the world, has a demon living inside her. And Abby is not about to let anyone or anything come between her and her best friend. With help from some unlikely allies, Abby embarks on a quest to save Gretchen. But is their friendship powerful enough to beat the devil? All right, I'm going to piss a lot of people off here. I really, really wanted to like this book. This was, like I said, our Spooky Book Club book for August. I'm part of a couple Facebook horror literature groups. That being said, I am not a boomer, I promise. Even though I do still use Facebook. Everyone in all of these groups does nothing but rant and rave about how great Grady Hendrix books are. And I read this one and another one of his books this month. So I was like all about it. I was super excited to get into it. Everybody said nothing but great things. And then I decided, after reading 2 of his books, that I hate how he writes women. I find the women in his stories to be completely intolerable, and the things they do to be put into the situations they find themselves in are completely unrealistic. I know that sounds harsh, but I have like super, super low standards when it comes to media that I enjoy. I love B-list horror movies and like badly written characters, but I just really, really couldn't get into the way he writes women. Abby was completely obnoxious. Gretchen was the worst. The rest of their friend group are just shells of characters that are there to be there and to have bad things happen to them. I didn't like anyone. I mean, like, it had some interesting plot points that could have been explored more and would have made the book more interesting, but it never went there. It was a really, really slow burn, and the Exorcism itself, mild spoilers, is only a few pages long and, like, super underwhelming. It was really, really cliche and just really hard to get through. I will say, though, that I love this cover, and it looks beautiful on my bookshelf. I unfortunately purchased this book instead of just getting it from my library. Definitely will not be rereading this or any other Grady Hendrix book. I'm going to prepare for the hate in the comments, but I just really don't like the way he writes at all. All right, the second Grady Hendrix book that I read this month was The Final Girl Support Group. In horror movies, the final girl is the one who's left standing when the credits roll, the one who fought back, defeated the killer, and avenged her friends. The one who emerges bloodied but victorious. After the sirens fade and the audience moves on, what happens to her? Lynette Tarkington is a real-life final girl who survived a massacre 22 years ago, and it has defined every day of her life since. She's not alone. For more than a decade, she's been meeting up with 5 other actual final girls and their therapist in a support group for those who survived the unthinkable, putting their lives back together, piece by piece. That is, until one of the women misses a meeting, and Lynette's worst fears are realized. Someone knows about the group, and is determined to take their lives apart again, piece by piece. But the thing about these final girls is they have each other now, and no matter how bad the odds, how dark the night, how sharp the knife, they will never, ever give up. Okay, again, I don't like Grady Hendrix. Didn't that synopsis sound fantastic? I love horror movies. I'm such a horror fanatic. I love the idea of the final girl. I've read literature on final girls. Like, I'm all about it. I liked this book way less than I liked my best friend's Exorcism. Lynette is the actual worst person I've ever read or met or seen ever. She is completely obnoxious, completely unrealistic. She puts everyone in danger around her, and she's extremely self-centered. I just could not get behind any of her actions. It was also forced, and the tropes were forced, and the ending made no sense. Without giving explicit spoilers, the ending was just a slew of characters that were mentioned once throughout the book and then have enormous roles in the plot for the last, chapter and a half. It came out of nowhere, and I had zero emotional connection to any of them since we never really got the chance to know any of the other characters, beyond surface level. Thankfully, I got this as a NetGalley, so I didn't waste any money on it, and I got to read it early. But I literally can't recommend any of Grady Hendrix's books. I mean, maybe you'll like it. Again, in that Facebook group, a lot of other people really, some people were saying that Grady Hendrix is their favorite author. So, I guess give him a go if you want, but both of these books are trash. I'm noticing now that it looks like August for me was the month of revisiting authors that I enjoyed reading, because this next book that I read is much shorter than the other ones, but it's A House at the Bottom of a Lake by Josh Malerman, author of Bird Box, if you didn't know. Both 17, both afraid, but both saying yes. It sounded like the perfect first date. Canoeing across a chain of lakes, sandwiches and beer in the cooler. But teenagers Amelia and James discover something below the water's surface that changes their lives forever. It's got 2 stories, it's got a garden, and the front door is open. It's a house at the bottom of a lake. For the teens, there's only one rule: no questions. And yet, how could a place so spectacular come with no price tag? While the duo plays house beneath the waves, one reality remains. Just because a house is empty doesn't mean nobody's home. So I really, really like Josh Malerman. Like, Bird Box gave me nightmares. If you haven't read the book and you've only watched the movie Bird Box, please, for the love of God, read the book, because the book is so much better than the movie. The movie was trash. This book was just okay. The premise was fascinating and so terrifying to me because I don't like deep water or the ocean at all. Like, people enjoy going on cruises. You couldn't pay me to go on a cruise. I don't like that. But the idea of a 2-story house underwater was really fascinating to me. All the parts with the houses I really enjoyed, but unfortunately I had to skim through most of the dialogue because I don't know if it's because they're supposed to be 17, but it was very dry and the dialogue didn't really sound like things that actual humans would say to each other, if that makes sense. I think the main reason why I didn't like this book was because there are graphic sexual scenes in it that make me extraordinarily uncomfortable because both of the characters are underaged. And before anybody says, oh, well, 17 is like almost 18 and blah, 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 age of consent. If you're 17, you are a child. And I don't like reading or watching adult scenes anyway, but especially not with children. It made me extraordinarily uncomfortable. So, yes, they are children. Shut up. If you're an adult and you enjoy sex scenes with teenagers, you're disgusting. Get away from me. It's a short read overall, and like, if you overlook the main characters and only focus on the house and everything, there's definitely a lot of really creepy scenes in it. Since it's so short, I can definitely recommend it, but I will not be reading it again. Then I read Small Favors by Erin E. Craig. Ellery Downing lives in the quiet town of Amity Falls in the Black Spire mountain range. 5 narrow peaks stretching into the sky like a grasping hand, bordered by a nearly impenetrable forest from which the early townsfolk fought off the devils in the woods. To this day, visitors are few and rare, but when a supply party goes missing, some worry that the monsters that once stalked the region have returned. As fall turns to winter, more strange activities plague the town. They point to a tribe of devilish and mystical creatures who promise to fulfill the residents' deepest desires, however grand and impossible, for just a small favor. But their true intentions are much more sinister, and Ellery finds herself in a race against time before all of Amity Falls, her family, and the boy she loves goes up in flames. Okay, this one I also got for free as a NetGalley. If you don't know what a NetGalley is, by the way, since I'm a librarian, I get access to books before they come out. So a NetGalley is basically an electronic version of the book before it comes out for people like booksellers and librarians and stuff like that. So this book was incredible. I was blown away with how much I enjoyed it. The main reason why I got this book is because it has over a 4-star review on Goodreads, and that's like unheard of. It's really, really hard to get a book that has a ton of reviews over a 4-star review. So I was like, all right, well, if a lot of other people are enjoying it, then I'll have to take a look at it. It's pretty predictable, which is like the only downside. But if you get past that and you're just along for the ride like I was, you're going to really enjoy this. The characters were really easy to relate to and easy to sympathize with. The plot was viscerally terrifying and so real. Again, like, realness is what makes things so scary to me. The ending was a bit fantastical, but it was really well done and pretty realistic considering what else was going on in the book. The horror was very raw and very visceral. I just couldn't help but enjoy it. I will 100% be purchasing this book to have in my collection, and I could not recommend it anymore. It was very, very good. The last 2 books on my list I listened to as audiobooks. I'm not a huge audiobook listener. I'm trying to get more into it. I really like podcasts, but sometimes it's really hard for me to get into audiobooks. The narrators on both of these are like, even if you're not interested in the books, you need to do yourself a favor and listen to both of these stories, even if it's just because of how absolutely incredibly disgustingly talented these audiobook narrators are. So they are the first 2 books in the Dread Nation series by Justina, Ireland. The first one is Dread Nation, and then the other one is Deathless Divide. Jane McKean was born 2 days before the dead began to walk the battlefields of Gettysburg and Chancellorsville, derailing the war between the states and changing America forever. In this new nation, safety for all depends on the work of a few, and laws like the Native and Negro Re-Education Act require certain children attend combat schools to learn to put down the dead. But there are also opportunities, and Jane is studying to become an attendant, trained in both weaponry and etiquette to protect the well-to-do. It's a chance for a better life for Negro girls like Jane. After all, not even being the daughter of a wealthy white Southern woman could save her from society's expectations. But that's not a life Jane wants. Almost finished with her education at Miss Preston's School of Combat in Baltimore, Jane is set on returning to her Kentucky home and doesn't pay much mind to the politics of the eastern cities with their talk of returning America to the glory of its days before the dead rose. But when families around Baltimore County begin to go missing, Jane is caught in the middle of a conspiracy, one that finds her in a desperate fight for her life against some powerful enemies. And the restless dead, it would seem, are the least of her problems. So like I said, run, do not walk, to get your hands on this audiobook. It is so incredible. It's an experience. And like, that sounds dramatic, but I literally have nothing but phenomenal things to say. The narrator's name is, I'm going to butcher this and I'm so sorry, Bonnie Turpin, Bahni, Bonnie Turpin. And she created the best listening experience I have honestly ever had in an audiobook. Her storytelling and voice acting is absolutely glorious, and everybody should experience it. Even if you don't love the story, you will love the way she narrates. It's so good. Now that that's out of the way, I enjoyed this a lot more than I thought I was going to. I've heard nothing but great things about it since it came out, and it was a Nutmeg book. I think, was it last year's Nutmeg? But I had a hard time reading it in print for some reason. I have ADHD, so sometimes I have a hard time reading books if it's worded strangely. And I have an easier time listening to it, which is why I tried this on audiobook. And I fell in love with Jane. All of the other characters are phenomenal. So much happens throughout the book, but none of it feels like it's too much or hard to follow. The progression is really great. I audibly gasped a few times while listening to this. I literally couldn't recommend this anymore. And then the last book I read this month was Deathless Divide, also by Justina, Ireland. The sequel to Dread Nation is a journey of revenge and salvation across a divided America. After the fall of Summerland, Jane McKean hoped her life would get simpler, get out of town, stay alive, and head west to California to find her mother. But nothing is easy when you're a girl trained in putting down the restless dead, and a devastating loss on the road to a protected village called Nicodemus has Jane questioning everything she thought she knew about surviving in 1880s America. What's more, this safe haven is not what it appears.
as Jane discovers when she sees familiar faces from Summerland amid this new society. Caught between mysteries and lies, the undead, and her own inner demons, Jane soon finds herself on a dark path of blood and violence that threatens to consume her. But she won't be in it alone. Catherine Devereaux never expected to be allied with Jane McKean, but after the hell she has endured, she knows friends are hard to come by, and that Jane needs her too, whether Jane wants to admit it or not. Watching Jane's back, however, is more than she bargained for, and when they both reach a breaking point, it's up to Catherine to keep hope alive, even as she begins to fear that there is no happily ever after for girls like her. So again, this one is narrated by Bonnie Turpin. Jordan Cobb also narrated it. They co-narrated. And I'm going to be repeating myself a lot here. This was such an enjoyable experience to listen to. I would 100% listen to both of these again. Just please go listen to this. Just do yourself the favor and listen to them. I normally have an issue with sequels because, the sequel is never as good as the original. I really enjoyed this sequel. It was a direct continuation of the story from the first one, but it never felt repetitive, and the story continued very flawlessly. I would absolutely add both of these to my personal collection and would 100% read them again and listen to them again, and they are just phenomenal and fantastic, and please go listen to them. So that is the list of all of the books I read in August. I will be making another video for the books that I finish in this month, September, if I manage to finish any before the month is out. If you have read any of these, let me know what you thought about them in the comments below. I would love to chat with you guys on how you felt about any of these. And if you have any suggestions on books that you think I should read and review, also let me know that down below. All right, well, thank you so much for watching. And remember, I love you, you should love you, and stay spooky.